What would you do if 400,000 lives depended on a single decision you made in the next 5 minutes? May 1940. The beaches of Dunkirk, France. The air thick with smoke, the sand stained with blood, and the desperate cries of Allied soldiers echoing across the English Channel. This wasn't just another battle. This was the moment when the entire course of World War II hung in the balance. And standing at the center of this chaos was a man whose name you've probably never heard, but whose courage saved more lives than any medal could ever honor. His name was Charles Lightoller, and this is his story, a story of impossible odds, unwavering courage, and one man's fight for humanity that changed the world forever. The man who survived the unsinkable. Before we dive into the beaches of Dunkirk, you need to understand who Charles Lightoller was, because his story didn't begin in 1940. It began 28 years earlier, in a cold April night in 1912, aboard a ship the world said could never sink, the RNS Titanic. Lightoller was the second officer on that fateful voyage. When the unsinkable ship struck an iceberg and began its descent into the icy Atlantic, Lightoller didn't panic. While chaos erupted around him, he methodically loaded lifeboats, following protocol even as the deck tilted beneath his feet. He was the last officer to leave the ship, swept into the freezing water as the Titanic made its final plunge. He survived by clinging to an overturned lifeboat for hours in sub-zero temperatures. Most men would have been broken by such an experience. Most would have sworn off the sea forever, but not Charles Lightoller. He returned to maritime service, served in World War I, commanded a destroyer, and even rammed and sank a German U-boat. By 1940, at 66 years old, he had retired to a quiet life in England with his wife and family. He had earned his peace. He had done his duty. He could have simply watched the war unfold from the safety of his home. But when his country called, he answered, not because he had to, but because he knew what was at stake. Operation Dynamo, the impossible rescue. By late May 1940, the situation in France was catastrophic. Hitler's blitzkrieg had torn through Europe with terrifying speed. The British Expeditionary Force, along with French and Belgian troops, nearly 400,000 men, were trapped on the beaches of Dunkirk with their backs to the sea and the German army closing in for the kill. The British Royal Navy faced an impossible task: evacuate hundreds of thousands of soldiers across 26 miles of open water under constant bombardment from German artillery, aircraft, and U-boats. The Navy's large ships couldn't get close enough to the shallow beaches. Time was running out. The soldiers were sitting ducks. Then came the call that would define a generation. We need every vessel that can float. The British Admiralty issued an unprecedented request to civilian boat owners: bring your vessels to Dunkirk. Fishing boats, pleasure yachts, tugboats, lifeboats, anything that could cross the channel and ferry soldiers from the beaches to the larger naval ships waiting in deeper water. It was called Operation Dynamo, and it was Britain's last hope. When Charles Lightoller heard the call, he didn't hesitate. He looked at his personal yacht, the Sundowner, a 60-foot motor yacht designed for leisurely cruises, not war zones, and he made his decision. He was going to Dunkirk. Into the jaws of death. On the morning of June 1, 1940, Charles Lightoller, along with his eldest son Roger and a young sea scout named Gerald Ashcroft, set sail from Ramsgate, England. The Sundowner was just one of hundreds of small vessels making the perilous journey, but Lightoller's experience and determination set him apart. As they approached Dunkirk, the scene was apocalyptic. The sky was black with smoke from burning oil refineries. German Stukas screamed overhead, dropping bombs that sent geysers of water erupting around the small boats. The beaches were packed with thousands of exhausted, desperate soldiers, many standing waist-deep in water waiting for rescue. Imagine being 66 years old, having already survived the Titanic and World War I, and voluntarily sailing into hell itself. But Lightoller didn't flinch. He maneuvered the Sundowner as close to the beach as possible, navigating through debris, bodies, and the constant threat of enemy fire. Other boats were being hit, sinking, exploding. Men were drowning within sight of rescue. The Royal Navy had estimated that the Sundowner could safely carry about 21 people. Lightoller looked at the thousands of men on that beach and made a different calculation, one based not on regulations, but on humanity. The miracle of the Sundowner. What happened next became the stuff of legend. Lightoller began loading soldiers onto the Sundowner. Not 21, not 50. He packed them in, on the deck, below deck, in every available space. He organized them, kept them calm, and kept loading. When soldiers protested that the boat was too full, that it would sink, Lightoller, the man who had survived the Titanic, simply replied, "I know more about how much a boat can carry than you do. Get on board." The German Luftwaffe continued their assault. Bombs fell around them. Machine gun fire strafed the water. Lightloller's son, Roger, manned the Lewis gun they had mounted on the yacht, firing back at German aircraft, a civilian yacht fighting the German Air Force. Through skill, courage, and sheer determination, Lightoller navigated the Sundowner back across the channel, overloaded beyond any reasonable capacity, through minefields and enemy fire, back to England. When they finally docked and counted the soldiers, the number was staggering: 130 men. A 60-foot yacht designed for 21 people had carried 130 soldiers to safety. It remains one of the most remarkable feats of seamanship in history. But Lightoller wasn't done. He wanted to go back. Only the Navy's insistence that the evacuation was complete stopped him from making another run.
The ripple effect of one man's courage. The Sundowner was just one boat among the 850 vessels that participated in Operation Dynamo, but Lightoller's story embodies the spirit that saved 338,226 Allied soldiers over 9 days, far more than anyone thought possible. Those 130 men Lightoller saved went on to live full lives. They had children. Those children had children. Today, it's estimated that thousands of people are alive because of what Charles Lightoller did on that single day. But the impact goes far beyond those individual lives. The successful evacuation at Dunkirk meant that Britain could continue fighting. Those rescued soldiers formed the core of the forces that would eventually liberate Europe. Without Dunkirk, Britain might have been forced to negotiate with Hitler. The entire trajectory of World War II and human history could have been different. And it all depended on ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Winston Churchill called it a miracle of deliverance, but it wasn't a miracle, it was courage. It was hundreds of Charles Lightollers, ordinary citizens, who saw their fellow humans in desperate need and risked everything to help. The lessons that echo through time. Charles Lightoller never sought fame for his actions at Dunkirk. He didn't write a memoir or give speeches. He simply went back to his quiet life, knowing he had done what needed to be done. He passed away in 1952, and for decades his story was largely forgotten outside of maritime history circles. But his legacy speaks to something timeless, something America needs to remember today. Lesson 1. Age is just a number when it comes to courage.
Lightoller was 66 years old when he sailed to Dunkirk. In an era in which that was considered elderly, he outperformed men half his age. He didn't let his age define his capability or limit his contribution. How many of us use age, too young, too old, as an excuse not to act? Lightoller reminds us that courage has no expiration date. Lesson 2. Past trauma doesn't have to define your future. Surviving the Titanic could have traumatized Lightoller for life. Instead, he used that experience to save lives at Dunkirk. He knew about ships, about the sea, about survival, and he put that knowledge to use when it mattered most. Your past struggles aren't just scars, they're training for the battles ahead. What you've survived has prepared you for what you're meant to do. Lesson 3. When the moment calls, you must answer. Lightoller could have stayed home. He had every excuse, his age, his service record, his family. But when he heard the call, he knew that some moments demand action, not excuses. We all face moments when we're called to step up in our families, our communities, our nation. The question is, will you answer? Lesson 4. One person can make a difference. It's easy to feel powerless in the face of overwhelming challenges, but Lightoller didn't save all 338,226 Allied soldiers. He saved 130, and those 130 mattered. Every single one of them mattered. You don't have to change the whole world. You just have to change the world for someone. That's how real change happens, one act of courage at a time. The activation. What will you do? Here's the uncomfortable truth. We're living in our own Dunkirk moment. Not literally, of course, but all around us people are trapped by poverty, addiction, injustice, despair. Our communities are under assault from division, hatred, and indifference. And just like in 1940, we face a choice. Do we stay safe on shore, or do we sail into the chaos to help? Charles Lightoller's story isn't just history, it's a challenge. It's asking you, what are you willing to risk for others? When will you stop making excuses and start making a difference? You don't need a yacht or a war to be a hero. You need courage. You need compassion. You need to see someone in need and decide that their life matters more than your comfort. Here's how you can honor Lightoller's legacy today. 1. Identify your Dunkirk. Where in your community are people trapped and desperate? Is it veterans struggling with PTSD? Kids in failing schools? Elderly neighbors living in isolation? Find your beach. 2. Use what you have. Lightoller didn't wait for the perfect vessel. He used what he had. What skills, resources, or time do you have that could help someone today? 3. Take the first step. Volunteer at a local charity. Mentor a young person. Stand up against injustice. Donate to a cause that saves lives. The size of the action matters less than the courage to begin. 4. Inspire others. Share the story. Tell people about Charles Lightoller. Remind them that ordinary people can do extraordinary things. Be the spark that ignites courage in others. 5. Never give up. Lightoller faced impossible odds and kept going. Whatever challenge you're facing, whatever cause you're fighting for, don't quit. The people who need you are counting on you to keep sailing. The hero we need today. America has always been a nation of Charles Lightollers, ordinary people who do extraordinary things when the moment demands it. From the Minutemen at Lexington to the firefighters running into the Twin Towers on 9/11, our history is written by people who answered the call. But here's the question that should keep you up at night. When your moment comes, will you be ready? Charles Lightoller didn't become a hero at Dunkirk. He became a hero through a lifetime of choosing courage over comfort, duty over ease, others over self. Dunkirk was just the moment when all those choices culminated in something extraordinary. Your moment is coming. It might not be dramatic, it might not make the history books, but it will matter to someone, somewhere, who desperately needs you to be brave. The beaches of Dunkirk are now empty, peaceful, and quiet. But the spirit that filled those beaches, the spirit of sacrifice, courage, and humanity, that spirit is eternal. It lives in every person who chooses to help rather than hide, to act rather than excuse, to sail toward danger rather than away from it. Charles Lightoller, the forgotten hero of Dunkirk, reminds us that we're all capable of more than we imagine, that age, fear, and past trauma don't have to stop us, that one person with courage and determination can save lives and change history. The question is, will that person be you? The world doesn't need more bystanders. It needs more heroes. It needs you. What will you do today that your future self will be proud of? Share this story, tag someone who inspires you, and commit to one act of courage this week. Because somewhere, someone is waiting on their beach, hoping that you'll be brave enough to sail toward them.